Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another edition of Intuitive Angling here. Really appreciate you guys sharing part of your day watching the video with me. I definitely don't take that for granted. Got a really good tip for you guys today. I'm going to share with you my technique for finesse wacky rigging. And this is something that's going to get you a ton of bites this spring, I can guarantee it. Show you guys how I rig it, how I set it up, and what I look for when I'm fishing it. So real quick before we get started, I just want to give you guys a weekly update. If you guys are interested in supporting the channel here and like what I'm doing, one of the best ways you can do that is become a member of the channel. And as a member, you get additional videos that aren't seen by the public every week, access to my personal email address with some of the memberships for your fishing questions. If you're interested with that, just go to go to my YouTube homepage, hit the About section, and just click on Intuitive Memberships, and it gives you the information. So much appreciated with that. Okay, guys. Wacky rigging, man, it's one of the deadliest springtime techniques that there is. Deadly all year long, but really in the springtime. And when most people think wacky rigging, they're talking about wacky rigging just like a Senko, or this is a Zoom Slinky, just a 5 or 6 cent soft plastic stick bait. This is what the majority of the people by far fish. And don't get me wrong, this is a fish catching bait for sure. But what I'm talking about, the finesse rigs, simply, you just get more bites, especially in tough conditions if it's clear water. There's 3 baits that I like to use with this, and the reason I like this is because of the diameter of the worm. The first one is I like a 6-inch robo worm. It's a small diameter worm. And then the Yamamoto thin Senko is another one I like. Here's the difference between like the size of the thin Senko versus the Slinky, which is about the same size as the regular Senko. And then my favorite one is a Zoom trick worm cut down. I don't use a finesse worm. I use a Zoom trick worm, and I cut it just above the egg sac because I like the fat tail on it that wiggles. This is my favorite one, and this is my favorite color in the baby bass. So it's a pretty simple technique here, guys. What you want to do is, you guys, if you've seen my past videos, one of the biggest mistakes is, I don't really call it mistake, but one of the biggest fads that you don't need in wacky rigging is a O-ring there. A lot of people slip an O-ring on it, and when they slip an O-ring, the hook on it is set up like that, which you do not want. Impedes the hook set. You'll lose more fish with it. The way that you want to rig any wacky rig is take your hook and put it right through the middle of the worm like that, because the hook is perpendicular to the worm, and you will not lose them like this. And you don't lose very few baits that I will ever lose with this. I mean, once in a while, the fish jumps hard, it'll spit one out. But the only reason people use the O-ring is they think it saves them baits, but it will cost you fish. So here's a big tip, just thread it on like that, nice and simple. Another thing is the hook. Before I get into the technique, you want a straight shank hook. A lot of the wacky rigs you guys see, they have like those, like the shiner type hooks or the octopus type hooks. Guys, those suck for wacky rigging. You want a straight shank. This hook, this is a Gamakatsu G Finesse straight shank. Usually anywhere between like a number 1 to number 2. You want to go smaller over bigger. That's the thing about it, is when you're rigging it like I show you, you don't need a big hook because you've got a lot of bite gap exposed there. So anyway, the difference between this is when you're finesse wacky rigging something like this cut down trick worm over like the Senko or a Zoom Slinky, the fall rate on both of these is completely different. The fall rate on a finesse wacky rig, whether you're using the robo worm or the Yamamoto thin Senko or the Zoom trick worm, the fall rate on this bait is twice as slow as this. This bait is going to fall a lot slower than the regular soft plastic stick bait. And this is the key element to why this is really effective in super clear water. I mean, that's most of the time when I'm using the finesse rig, I'm using it in water visibility of at least 3 feet, and I prefer like 4 to 6 feet of visibility. And another key on this thing is the tackle that you have to use is extremely light. You want to use no more than 6-pound test line, because in order to get the distance of the cast on this, the 6-pound test will allow you to get a lot more further cast, and it gives the bait a lot more natural fall on the presentation. Again, you guys know I use straight fluorocarbon. I don't use the braid to fluorocarbon. But basically what you're looking for on the Finesse Wacky rigs, this bait is going to work good when those fish are close to spawning or actually bedding, one of the two. So I start throwing it when that water temperature starts to get in the high upper 50s, it's close to 60 degrees in the morning, because there's a big difference between the water temperature hitting 60 degrees after it's been warm all day, or if you launch the boat in the morning. But when that water temperature is right around 60 degrees when you first launch your boat in the morning, that is the key to when you want to start fishing this thing, and you fish it all the way up into the early post spawn. So there's about a 3-week window when the Finesse Wacky is extremely productive. So what you want to do is just get into the spawning type coves and just go down the bank, just creep down the bank and try to target the banks at a 45-degree angle, cast up to the bank and work that bait down to about anywhere between 5 to 10 foot of water. Now, on a bait like this, to get it down into 10 foot of water, you've got to let it sink a long time. But the good thing about this is 90% of the time on these Finesse Wacky rigs, the bite comes before this bait gets to the bottom. The time that I found that they bite this thing is like when that bait gets like a foot to 2 feet from the bottom. That's when they usually get it. But there's a couple things you can do to trigger them. Here's another thing that you can do. When you cast this thing out there, cast it to the bank and twitch it back along the surface real fast, like that, about that far into the surface. And a lot of times, if there's a bedding or a cruising bass nearby, they will come up and nail this thing as you're moving it fast. So I'll cast it out to the bank, I'll jerk it like that across the surface, not on the surface, but let it about that far into the surface, and I'll work it back from the bank, maybe 5 or 6 feet off the bank, and then I'll drop it and I'll let it sink. Now, once it hits the bottom, what I like to do is I like to pop it real hard and let it sink down. And if they haven't hit it by then, go ahead and reel in. Don't work this bait all the way back to the boat. My cast on this thing is that once that bait hits the bottom, I pop it one time, let it sink back down, and I reel it in and make another cast. Not only will this allow you to cover more water, but you just don't hardly ever get a bite on this thing if you're working it past once it hits the bottom. It's a sight bait, and they get it really quick when it gets close to the bottom. But guys, give this a try. I'm telling you, it is a deadly bait. Even though I've got the thin Senko out here in green pumpkin, I prefer some type of a shad pattern. Like I said, I've caught tons on this baby bass Zoom trick worm. Get you some baby bass Zoom trick worms. You can get them at Baitworks. I'll put the link in the description. And cut it down right above the egg sac, and just see how many bites you get on this thing. Once that water temperature hits 60 to 70 degrees, in that range. So give it a try, guys. I know it's going to get you a ton of bites this spring. And again, thanks for tuning in. Getting ready, heading to Stockton Lake here this morning. Got an on the water lesson at Stockton Lake. We'll check in with you guys later. See you.